along the far frontier, from the blue bonnet prairies of Texas to the mountains California way. Those hard-riding sons of the saddle do their duty night or day. Their fame has grown in every place they're known along the far frontier. They stand for right and for their cause they'll fight if trouble should appear. When the history of the West is written, to the world it will be clear. There's glory in the story of the Border Patrol along the far frontier.
Hector is the acting division chief for the Rio Grande Valley sector of the Border Patrol and a 31-plus year veteran with the U.S. Border Patrol. So I know we're going to receive some very good information concerning the migration situation on the border and any other information he'll impart to us today. I'm not sure we'll have time for questions. That's up to him and our time for today's meeting. So without further ado, Mr. Escamilla, thank you so much for being here. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you all for having us here on behalf of Chief Carrick. You wanted me to come out and thank you all for the work that you do and try to answer as many questions as I can. I'll try to keep my briefing a little short so that we do have some time for questions and so on. I hope I'm not interrupting your lunch, so I'll try to take it slow here so that some of you can finish eating in case you do have some questions. So a little bit of background on me. I was born here in McAllen. I've been in the Border Patrol 30 years, mostly between Phoenix and Springs all the way to Brownsville. I've never been outside of Texas other than for a few months at a time here and there. But nonetheless, I've been around quite a bit and seen a lot of different things, different migration patterns, different trends throughout the course of the years, and we're definitely having one that's having a big impact on not just us, the Border Patrol here in the Rio Grande Valley, but nationwide, and it's having a big impact on our communities also. So I'll start out with giving you all an idea of what we face day in and day out as far as our area of responsibility. First of all, here in the Rio Grande Valley, we're about 3,100 agents strong. Sounds like a lot of agents, and it is, but we definitely could use more, especially in this particular time of need. But those 3,000 plus agents really dwindled down quite a bit when we got to go and perform our own training at the academies. We instruct our own agents at the academies. We support headquarters in Washington with a lot of personnel for statistical data reports that need to be done. And just a lot of different things that happen throughout the course of our day-to-day operations. Agents are responsible for also managing our budgets and operating costs, acquisitions, and so on. So the actual people that we put out in the field after we grant people sick leave and their daily life routines of vacation really dwindles down to approximately half of that number on duty on any other time at best. So we covered 316 river miles from the mouth of the Rio Grande all the way to the Falcon Dam. That's a pretty daunting task. A lot of the area that we cover is dense brush, of course, as you all know, South Texas. The lateral mobility is very difficult because a lot of the land that we patrol is owned by personal landowners. So we've got to go from one property to the next. There's fence lines, there's property lines that we can't just traverse continuously along the river. And aside from that, there's refuge that is very difficult to traverse and very difficult for us to actually go through there, even though they're a government agency partner. There's a lot of policies and so on that prevent us from just going into a refuge and mowing the place down in order to make our job easier. So there's a lot of cooperation that has to happen for us to be able to clear some of the land that we need to patrol. So difficult area to traverse. Aside from the river miles from, again, the mouth all the way to Falcon Dam, we're actually responsible for the entire shoreline all the way up to the Louisiana border. So we do have agents in different places along the coastline, and we do have a Corpus Christi office. So aside from the 6 line stations that we do have the 2 checkpoint stations in Kingsville and Far Furious, and the Corpus Christi office. So we do have, a pretty good tactical spread of where we apply our agents. The majority of our agents are from the Westlaco area, out the Santa Ana Refuge, Progreso Port of Entry, all the way over to Starr County. That's where we have the majority of our agents. And I'll tell you why that is. Years ago, it was actually lopsided. As you can see here by the orange depictions, that's where we have most of our technology currently that can feed live pictures into the stations. That's where we have the most of our technology deployed currently, as well as fencing. We do have almost 56 miles of fencing currently along the Rio Grande Valley. The bollard fencing that you guys, I'm sure, are familiar with. Either you've seen yourselves or you've seen it in the news. So as the years went by and we started to deploy technology on our easternmost part of the Rio Grande Valley, what used to be the hotbed in Brownsville has fluctuated out here to Starr County and western Hidalgo. That's where we have the least amount of tactical infrastructure, which is our fencing, technology, and so on. We've come a long ways. We've got some aerostats out there, which are those blimps that you see. They're very, very capable of providing us some great visibility, a great force multiplier for us. We have approximately 4 of those, and we do have one out there in Falfurrias that provides some help to the checkpoint stations. They've got a very vast capability as far as a view shed on what we have coming at us, but they're also limited. That technology can't see through the dense brush. It's not a catch-all. So again, back to the harsh terrain that we have out there. It's tough to get visibility even with that particular type of technology. Aside from that, as you all are very familiar with our environment here, we have very windy conditions, so we can't keep those up very often. At best, combined, we get about a 62 to 65 percentile on the time that they're up in the air. The rest of the time, they have to come down, and we have to, safely put them down on the ground so that we don't lose them and damage the equipment that's on. So, and it's very expensive. We don't own it. We have to contract it out. So it is costing us a pretty penny to keep those 5 blimps up in the air. So currently, again, we are going through a phase of trying to improve our capabilities. You guys, I'm sure, again, have seen it all in the news, from here all the way to the Beltway in Washington to fight for the wall. Those are some of the things that are currently happening out in Starr County. We're starting to make a little bit of leverage with the communities there, working out some cooperative agreements on what would be best for the communities there, landowners, as far as where to place the wall without displacing families and so on. So we are in some good communication with the local folks in the communities out there. So some of those funds have already been appropriated in Hidalgo County. So you'll see some fencing already starting up to supplement the one we currently have. So I'll talk a little bit now about the mass migration and the numbers that we're seeing right now, currently, with the family units and unaccompanied children. So our apprehensions are up well over 100% from last year. We've apprehended already about 165,000 people to date for the fiscal year, which started October 1. That is pretty significant. And on top of that, our apprehensions for other than Mexicans has gone up about 150%. So it's been a tough times. The humanitarian effort has really taken away our ability, time-wise and manpower-wise, to be able to concentrate on the adversary that we would rather concentrate on, called the narcotic flow, the flow of the people that come here that have the criminal histories behind it and so on and so forth. But unfortunately, that is part of the tactic, and it is a big income for the cartels to bring these family members here. They don't come here and drop them off on our doorstep for free. In fact, they take full advantage of the fact that they know we're going to care for those people, and we're going to do our best, to perform the humanitarian effort. And, it is literally a tactic to tie us up so that they can go around us and flank us with other commodities that are a lot more dangerous, to the public. So I'll show you guys a little bit about what's going on in some of the depictions here. This vehicle here, we're getting these float acrosses. They're actually vehicles that are already fully loaded with narcotics, and they float them across on these makeshift rafts with 50-gallon drums and so on. So as soon as they hit the U.S. riverbanks on one of the dirt roads out there, it's loaded and ready to go, and they don't waste any time. So we're seeing that a lot, even out there in the eastern flanks, near Brownsville and Harlingen, where we actually do have the visibility on camera and some of the wall. Of course, once they hit the riverbanks, we don't have somebody at every crossing point. It takes them seconds to minutes to disappear into the neighborhoods or into the farm and market roads, pay streets in the city limits, and they're gone. But fortunately, our camera systems are giving us a good heads up, and we're able to interdict some of that. Checkpoints, seeing more and more, of huge numbers coming across in tractor trailers this fiscal year. There's been a big spike of apprehensions in tractor trailers, refrigerated trucks, so on and so forth. We're getting groups of hundreds at a time. I'll give you an example. Last night in Stark County, out in the Roma area, we got a group of 180 at one time that were dropped on our riverbanks of women and children in one particular group alone. So, imagine the amount of manpower that it takes to just watch over this group of folks, because not all of them are your economic type folks, economic migrant folks. So it's a mixture of some people with criminal backgrounds, women and children. So very dynamic, very difficult scenario to manage when you've got children that are unaccompanied, family units here, bad guys there. How do you separate them out in the dark? So it takes a lot of our manpower, and we do have pretty good intelligence resources that are telling us while this is going on, they're flanking us, the public is gone, and giving us information that we're having a very difficult time addressing because we're having to deal with things like this. When we have been successful, this was in the news, we had a pretty successful apprehension of some cocaine, almost 750 pounds of coke a few months back in the Stark County area. Some of the equipment we discovered there, very high-tech type of equipment that had been deployed against us at that particular area. Cameras that could detect us, equipment that could detect any one of our radio communications, and so on and so forth. So they were very well prepared. The place was very well guarded. And UTVs that were being used to take the narcotics from the river over to the residences in the area. So they dumped that in the water when we chased them. They were equipped with caltrops, which is a makeshift piece of equipment where they weld nails together and throw them at us when we start chasing them to flatten our tires. So those are some of the challenges that we see, aside from the migration problems that we have right now. Of course, another thing that they use quite a bit is UTVs that can traverse through tough terrain, and when things get pretty bad for them, they just dump them in the river full of the narcotics, and sometimes with the people still in it. If it's not a narcotic load, it's just a human trafficking load, they'll dump it in the river, and the folks will try to get out and swim to safety. And that becomes a big challenge for us, because instead of an apprehension, now it's turning into a rescue for us. But we do have some pretty good coverage from our marine operations folks that help us out with that. Some of you have heard of our Boar Star agents. They're an EMT group, specialized group that we have, that they traverse the vast lands out, especially in the ranch country. And aside from their normal routine of going out there and actually, looking looking for apprehensions and so on and so forth. They're well equipped to perform rescues and provide first aid and IVs and everything else. So we have these folks deployed, especially in the hot summer months, trying to help out the northern checkpoint stations that we have. A lot of MS-13s, unfortunately, that doesn't make the news quite a bit, but some of the folks that we do get come with a long history here in the U.S., and sometimes we're able to have good communication with their countries of origin, and they provide us with some good feedback on some of the criminal histories that have occurred in their countries of origin. So some pretty concerning backgrounds on some of the folks that we do catch. So, back to when we get purposely, and I will say purposely, tied up with the family units. We've got people like this guy in the runaway vehicle. Those are the ones we want to catch. They may not be as plentiful as the family units, but these are the ones we'd like to concentrate on, and it's very difficult to do currently with the big numbers that we're seeing with the family units. You guys probably saw this in the news 2 days ago. Caught that toddler that abandoned the sugar cane out there, and left abandoned out there crying. Unfortunately, we found him. They scribbled his name on his shoes and a phone number to call. So those are some of the things we're seeing quite often. The cartels are ruthless. These people ain't coming for free. Be rest assured that nobody comes across without paying a hefty price. And unfortunately, they take advantage. The cartels know that we're going to send them forward to these detention centers, and we're bound by policy and law to only detain them for a certain amount of time, and then they're going to walk. So be rest assured that even after they walk and they traverse into the northern part of the United States with their documents in hand to go see the judge and wherever their final destination may be, they're going to continue to keep being exploited even thereafter, because again, we conduct very in-depth interviews. We've got really good intelligence on what happens after they're let go. Cartels have different cells throughout the entire United States where they continue to be exploited for money, or obligated to work for free or for very low wages in different places. Despite the fact that they released them on the riverbanks, they're still following tail to where their final destination is. So very difficult times that some of these folks are experiencing as far as the exploitation is concerned when they come here. Kind of hard to read from here, but there's a communication between cartel members to cartel members on how they're trying to take advantage of the migration. And again, it doesn't take a rocket scientist for these cartel folks to realize that we're actually, because of our policies and so on, helping them out with their efforts, if you would, because they know that we're going to pick them up from the riverbanks and take care of these folks, take them to these shelters, and the exploitation on their part continues because they're taking advantage of our policies, rules, and regulations, and what we do thereafter when we catch them. So again, it's easy for them to follow the flow and make money off of that flow, and based on what they know we're going to do thereafter, in our humanitarian efforts. So that's again very difficult for us to do our job on trying to target the adversary, the cartels, when they tie us up with such a huge flow that we're currently experiencing. We've been averaging somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 people that we have in detention day in and day out. We've had some weeks where we're averaging 9,000 apprehensions on a 7-day period. So pretty heavy flow, and one of the things that we have difficulty with, not just in our day-to-day encounters with them, but the detention thereafter. We're only supposed to be a temporary facility at each one of our stations, but we've been forced to have to do more and more because the agencies, our sister agencies that are supposed to support us with detention and removal, they're overwhelmed. And they're even worse staffed than the Border Patrol is, unfortunately. So it's difficult for them to keep up with the pace. So we're having to hold on to them longer than we should. and overburden our detention centers, which again are really made just for a 24-hour period. And currently, you've heard of the facility that's going up over there in the down port of entry. We're probably going to have to man that with a lot of border patrol agents also. So that's just an emergency overflow, because currently we are exceeding our detention capabilities by far day in, day out. So those are some of the things I just want to kind of skim through, and I'll take some questions if you guys have them, as best as I can. Yes, sir.
The OTMs, they call that other than Mexicans.
Sure.
You said it's up 150%. The others, 165,000 to date since October.
Mm-hmm.
Other than a percentage, I know that there's been reports that people come from as many as 44 countries,
Yes.
even overseas. And then
Overseas, yes.
Is there a way to put a number on that rather than a percentage? Like of that 165,000, maybe 2,000 were.
Yeah, I don't have those numbers exactly, but the majority of the OTMs are from the Central American countries of El Salvador, Nicaragua, Guatemala, Honduras. So those are the ones that are predominantly the numbers that feed the OTM category.
About Asia and even Europe and Middle
Yes,
East.
we've gotten Middle Eastern folks here, we've gotten Iraqis, Iranians, a lot of Chinese. Chinese are more common than people might think. Pakistanis.
Cubans too, I hear.
Cubans, we're catching Cubans, but so we've got a few, did they take them with them? Some of the common countries, I think they took the other displays with them, but some of the other common countries are China, and those bring large amounts of money for the cartels.
Wow.
Yeah, so up to $15,000 to $20,000 a person. So we've done some research and some estimates. So we estimate that the cartels are making as much, if not more, money on the human trafficking than they do on the actual smuggling of narcotics currently.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So, yes, ma'am.
You mentioned, you mentioned several times and stressed the importance of technology to what you're doing.
Yes, ma'am.
Certainly, when you're undermanned, you need the best technology you can get. Now, the best technology is the 5G technology, but I'm wondering if you have it, since 5G does not work well in sparsely populated areas, and you're dealing in sparsely populated areas. So do you have the best technology, which is 5G, and how do you do it when you don't have a dense population area?
Well, there's this new rollout of technology that we're supposed to get. I'm not 100% familiar with whether it's 5G or what capability it has, but it is above and beyond what we have out on the east side, which is already 15 plus years in existence, from Brownsville to approximately the western side of the Willacy County area. We do have some grade towers, military grade type towers that can give us pretty good visibility also. But some of that technology isn't all that we could probably get as far as up to date, because if you have one tower go down in between the chain of 6 or 7, that kind of breaks the technology or the transmission, I would say, of what we could see on down the line. So it's almost like a daisy chain reaction. If one tower goes down, they all go down. So yes, there's definitely some major improvements to be had. But we do have some folks from the technology part of what we do, the scientific part of our offices at CBP here, analyzing all of that and trying to do an assessment on what's best for this particular area. Again, the Rio Grande Valley area is very difficult to address as far as the topography, the geography. Unlike some places like Arizona, New Mexico, where it's flatland desert, you've got really good visibility, and the transmission of all the technology is a lot easier. It's a lot more difficult here because of the terrain that we have, for sure. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. If it's true, the children that are coming, that sometimes they're reused,
Yes.
do we keep up with that? So we see the family that are coming, that the same child has been used again And again, are we keeping up with that?
Okay, very good question, ma'am. In fact, there is an uptick on the fraud cases that we're determining nationwide, not just here in the Rio Grande Valley. So normally we won't fingerprint or photograph because of policies, children under the age of 14. But we can if we have to, and we're starting to have to use some of the laws that do govern us and having the ability to identify some of these children. And so we're finding more and more fraudulent cases. We have a team dedicated from our intelligence departments. These are our plainclothes officers that are more investigative types instead of enforcers out in the field. And we have them dedicated to strictly interviewing people, family units that we identify, that we see some signs. And we were discovering quite a few cases. The new Secretary for Homeland Security was here just a few days back. And that is one of the things that he wants to really have us concentrate on. So there is an effort to improve upon that. And some of the statistics that we're discovering as far as the fraudulent cases are alarming. So yeah, there's definitely something that's happening, and we're going to keep a close eye on that. We're going to try to start pushing for some court cases to come out of that. We're going to try to prosecute some of those folks, and see if we can use that as a deterrent, because it is definitely something that's starting to get more and more rampant. Yes, ma'am.
So there's been changes at the top, changes in policy by the president. How is that impacting you, and is it top, bottom, or bottom up? Are they taking any of your advice that you're right here, where the so-called action is? Do they even know what's going on?
Yes, they do. That's, right now, again, there's a lot of controversy, at the higher levels with, the opposition to the wall and so on and so forth. But it's not all about that. One of the things, again, right now that we're really trying to bring to the forefront is the exploitation of these family units and the amount of money that's bringing to the cartels, and the exploitation of the children. It's definitely something that's happening. We're trying to gather as much statistics as possible, and again, trying to bring that to the forefront to the assistant U.S. attorneys so that they can help us push that message up to the Beltway, so that we can at least make some ground in regards to that. Because if we can eliminate the mass migration of families and children and the exploitation of them, then we'll be able to concentrate on doing more of the border security work that we want to, concentrate on. But there is some big help. Again, Secretary McAllen, who was our CBP commissioner, now he's been moved up. He's very engaged. He was just here a week ago, and he's very well versed with what's going on, and he's trying to do his best and giving us his support. So we're seeing some strides. We're hoping to see even more so here in the next few months.
And he listens?
And he listens. Yes, he does. Yes, ma'am.
Do you see these people staying here in the community? Instead, you mentioned going to other places that maybe the cartels are still extorting something from them when they go someplace else.
The majority of the folks that we encounter that come in, their ultimate destinations are the interior of the United States, and mostly northern. Seems like northeast coast, so on and so forth. But some of them do go to the west coast. But when they commit to the Rio Grande Valley to enter, most of them are pretty much going to the eastern coast. The ones that enter out there towards the desert areas of Arizona, California, they tend to stay out there. I think that kind of pretty much determines which entrance they're going to take. But sometimes that's not the entire reason why they come in. Rio Grande Valley versus Arizona. It just depends on which cartel gets a hold of them. Not just in the interior of Mexico, but the cartels extend all the way to the Central American countries. They have their cells out there too. So it starts way out there. Hey, look, we're going to go to the RGV. These are the people that we've been contracted with. So we're coming in through McAllen. Rio Grande City, so on and so forth. But the majority of them do not stay here in the Rio Grande Valley.
You're fighting an uphill battle, almost as reminiscent of the early stages of the Vietnam War, when the poor soldiers over there were fighting something that, you know, they had their hearts all in it, but didn't have the resources. I hear a lot of conversation about high-tech application. It would appear to me that we haven't really recognized the fact that northern Mexico is a failed state, that the cartels control everything that goes on, and that they're the ones that are managing strategically what you're fighting, and you don't have the resources, you're not as well funded as they are, and whatever we come up with in terms of technology, they're using these pawns. And coincidentally, I flew out of here a couple of weeks ago, and there was a young boy sitting next to me who was one of about 10 kids from 10 to 14 years old that were flying someplace. They were unaccompanied minors. The poor kid was totally traumatized. Obviously, he'd never been on a plane before. And I felt so sorry. There were 2 Catholic charities, people that were ushering about 10 kids in on this plane. They did a marvelous job, and it's a thankless job. But we really don't have the resources or want to acknowledge in the United States that the cartels are controlling all of this. You merely are trying to put your finger in the dike, and that's what I feel so badly about. You're putting your lives at risk, you're putting your finger in the dike, and there's no way that you can fight the cartels. And as you say, they're in Honduras, El Salvador, and they're bringing all these people up. So I just want to make sure that you know that we thank you. The poor kid that I stood next for, he's a pawn, or rode next to, he's just a pawn in this. I felt so sorry for the kid. Didn't speak a word of English, obviously.
I want to elaborate a little bit on the control and the power that the cartels do have, and the strengths that they have versus the Mexican government, and it is alarming. If you talk to some of the residents out there in Starr County, for example, especially in Roma, you can see the firefights going on the Mexican side at night. You can even see the flashes of the ammunition in the air, so on and so forth. It's alarming, and it's pretty discouraging to the local folks there, because a lot of them have some close family ties that go on for generations on both sides of the border. Good family ties. Unfortunately, there's some bad family ties, and that's what draws a lot of the cartels to the area, a lot of the the illegal activity there, because it's so isolated from both not just the main government agencies in Mexico City, but even the local garrisons and military that are capable of facing the cartels. They have a hard time getting out to those areas and managing that. So it is alarming that out there it is a no man's land, but not just us, but the local law enforcement folks out there, and in every one of the counties here, Cameron, Willis, Hidalgo, Starr, our local law enforcement partners together here on the U.S. side anyway. I think we do a really good job on forming coalitions and working together, and we've really improved upon that in the last several years. I'd say 5 years ago, we probably didn't have that cooperation, that daily liaison, and we do now. We get a lot of great support from the cities of Roma, Rio Grande City, Starr County sheriffs, in regards to making sure that, at least on the U.S. side, our communities are safe. If we look at every one of the cities, in fact, surprisingly, you would think Rio Grande City and Starr County rank pretty high up there in regards to some of the safest cities in the U.S. as far as crime rates being low and so on. But it doesn't take take away from the fact that on the Mexican side, it's a very volatile situation, and there is generations on the bad side of things that are just long-standing, and it makes it difficult for us to infiltrate some of the networks there, because they hold a lot of strong connectivity on both sides of the border. So yes, big concern. But I will say that Mexico is doing a lot better job, the government of Mexico, in communicating with us daily. We do have immediate communication with them within minutes to hours. And in many cases, they have shown up in numbers. But it is difficult for them to show. There's places where they'll flat out tell us, we can't go there. We don't have a stronghold there, we'll be outnumbered. It's like walking into certain death. So there's some places where they just don't have the manpower and the ability to come help us. But they are getting better as far as their communication and cooperativeness with us. So as far as the border security piece.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So what do you know, since you said about a number of people coming in, that they've put in the news about that beast where everybody's coming in on that train?
Yes.
It's a two-sided question. That, and then, is that Donna Tent City full? Or what's the story on that as well?
Okay, so that train they call the Beast La Bestia. It's been in existence for years. Why the government of Mexico can't stop the train and take the people off, I don't understand that. I can't answer that question, but it exists. And the photographs and the film clips that you see on the news are absolutely correct. That is one of the main travel conveyances that some of these Central American folks use, because it starts way out in Guatemala. And the Mexican-Guatemalan border, it traverses through most of Mexico. And along the way, they can pick certain locations where they do finally get off and pick a route of travel and align forces with one of the cartels that will bring them all the way in. Yeah. So as far as the tent city, that is going to be a contracted facility. Again, it's going to be an overflow because currently we are exceeding our capability to an extreme at each one of our locations. And our fellow partners with detention and removal folks and even health and human services can't keep up with us. So we're trying to find overflow space, at least temporarily, until hopefully through policy, which is really going to be the key, is for our lawmakers to change policy, allow us to deport people easier, quicker, and able to detain folks for the amount of time that we need necessary to make the determinations of asylum and so on. If that doesn't happen, that this is going to continue. So those are some of the things that are keeping us from.
So over there in Donna, that tent city's not open yet?
Not open yet. It's scheduled to open in the next few weeks. I'm not sure what the date is. Do you, Joe? No. But it should be coming in the next few weeks. Yeah. So
Will that help with the whole respite center and that problem that we have over here?
probably not. Probably not. I mean, we will still continue to see the releases from a lot of the Border Patrol stations because the folks from ICE are not able to keep up with the process themselves on removing the folks. After 21 days, we can no longer legally hold them, not us, not ICE, and unless they have criminal histories and so on, then we had to resolve to releasing them out the doors to the respite centers. We're trying to communicate with the cities where we are releasing them with the respite center and Sister Norma, but even then it's difficult to talk to them about every single person we're going to release. Some of these folks are starting to become a nuisance, and unfortunately, to the communities, a big burden on the communities, not just financially, but with some of the health concerns that they may bring and so on and so forth. So.
And what about some of those people, I'm sorry, that's my last question. What about some of those people that, from different, like Washington State, that said that they would be sanctuary cities? I mean, are you being able to transfer some over there or not?
Well, we hear talk about that, but we haven't been given any guidance or direction in regards to that. No. Okay. Sir?
Could you explain how asylum works, what the law requires and what is optional?
I'll give you what I do know about it. So the majority of the folks that come here, they come from economic hardship countries, and that's usually what they tell us as far as the reason why they're fleeing. There is a lot of, for most of those Central American countries, a lot of poverty, a lot of gangs, violence, MS-13s, and so on. But again, an asylum process and the reasons for asylum should be specific to the individual. Did the cartels, did the gangs in their country of origin specifically target them for whatever reason, for political reasons, etc., and not so much there's an economic crisis in the country, right? But yet those are some of the reasons being used, and in some cases, some of the reasons being approved, and so on and so forth, some of the factors. So they're trying to clarify that. We'd like to see where asylum officers are more accessible to us, actually at Border Patrol stations. In fact, there's talk of Border Patrol agents having the authority to listen to the asylum claims ourselves so that we can expedite the process. But of course, that's being met with a lot of resistance, and probably it's going to be met, if we do go into that endeavor, it's going to be met with a lot of lawsuits and, court scenarios. So, good question. Yes?
I think I may ask an additional one. I talked to a gentleman yesterday who he's a citizen guy that watches the border near Brownsville. He estimated that you need about 4,000 new agents, and that when you're stationed along the border, you should be about a quarter mile apart, give or take, and always have 2 agents per truck, never have them alone. Do those numbers and scenarios make sense?
It just depends. Again, I couldn't tell you that it would take 4,000 more agents to control the area here, but the more agents we have, the better. And some agents are very well adept, and we're well trained, and we can work alone if we have to. It is always better to have a partner, but usually, even if we're alone in a vehicle, we're never going to address the situation by ourselves. The next closest station will always give you the support. But what we really do need is a lot of different factors, and again, one of them is policy. Until we start returning some of these migrant families and children back to their country of origin quickly, so that it'll make it more difficult for them to make a second, third trip, unfortunately, for those that have the need for a better life. But as you all well know, we're here to support the world, but we can only do so much. So until we start to change policy and allow us to, again, do our job easier in regards to the deportation process and the asylum cases being expedited, then I don't care how many agents you give us, it's just not going to do us any good. So there's got to be a change in policy, there's got to be a change in some of the laws and so on, and some of the communication and State Departments, that's huge too. So we got to communicate with the heads of these countries in regards to why can't you take your people back quicker than what you currently do? Because it's a really slow and strict process on being able to return somebody back to the country of origin. A lot of it has to do with consulate officer communication and so on.
It sounds like we need to know a lot more about what's driving them out of their countries in the first place, because that's the font, or that's the fountainhead of the whole problem.
Correct. And right now, again, it's the Central American countries, but what's next, right? The next country that gets into a crisis, those South American type scenarios we're seeing, that could be next. So right now, we're being overburdened by, 3 major countries, really: Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras. So if we get that kind of influx from a few other countries, we're going to be in an even more difficult situation.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Go ahead, sir.
When somebody claims asylum to a Border Patrol agent, what happens to them? Who's the ultimate hearer of that and decider?
We have an actual cadre of CBP employees, DHS employees. They are actually asylum officers. That's all that they do. There's just not enough of them. And it's hard for them to listen to thousands of people, not just the ones coming into the Rio Grande Valley, but nationwide. So they're deployed across the country, these asylum officers, and they do have a specialized training, but it's not something that really cannot be condensed into us having as Border Patrol agents, the main training and the main facts and facets of what it takes to make that decision. So that would be a huge win for us if we could start to either have asylum officers multiplied and accessible to us a lot easier, or give us the authority to conduct some of those interviews ourselves and make those determinations ourselves.
May I
Do you have a question, ma'am?
Yes. Do you know if there is anyone at your upper level that has connected with a senator or representative or someone with a recommendation for a policy change? Is that in the works in the background?
Man, they come here all the time.
But they take pictures and
From both sides of the spectrum, on both sides of the parties. And we tell them, we give them more in-depth briefings that I'm giving you all. because we can say a little more to our lawmakers, right? So there's small strides happening, but again, they should all be well aware of, you know, how we stand and what we're facing here. So yes, we tell them all the time. So, yes, sir.
I've understood that in terms of drug apprehensions, that you only interdict about 1/7 or 1/10 of the, at least that's an estimate of the drugs that you're able to actually catch. Is that a current statistic? Is there still 9/10 that gets through, especially with the diversions that you have to face today with all of the undocumented migrants?
Well, I can't speak to the exact percentage that we may or may not be catching of the entire flow that comes into the border area, the border region here in South Texas. But I can say that this fiscal year alone, we're down almost 40% in our narcotic apprehensions. And I would venture to say that a lot of that is because of the rise in the migration that we have is keeping us too busy to concentrate on the other part of it. So the statistics pretty much show that right now. Our apprehensions for narcotics are down, and our apprehensions for our family units and unaccompanied children are way up. So I think they correlate for sure.
So then I could conclude that instead of 1/10, maybe it's a half of a tenth that you're apprehending in the mass majority.
Again, back to the number, not sure. We'll say that on any given fiscal year, we think we're at 10% at our best. On some years, we think we apprehend more than other years based on intelligence we get from EPIC and different law enforcement agencies, intelligence agencies out there. So our effectiveness rate fluctuates from year to year. And again, a lot of it is based on what's keeping us busy. If we have the time to address the narcotic flow, we've got some, again, really good relationships with our local, state, and federal law enforcement partners, and in some cases with the government of Mexico, but hard to address when we're facing the other dilemma. So I think that was missing.
Would you comment on the efficacy or the changes that have been made during the Trump administration for the past 2 years? Has there been any assistance to you? And what would you anticipate if the politics change into a Democratic Party in 2020?
Joe, you want to take that one? I asked the general a difficult question once, and he drank his coffee and walked out and didn't come back. But no, several changes that we've seen under this new administration have been very, very helpful, very effective. We are getting some of the funding that we needed, but again, you're all well aware of the struggles on both sides, on both parties. So as soon as we get some relief as far as funding, some policy changes that are in our favor, they're met with court challenges and so on and so forth. So a lot of the things that we are benefiting from under this administration, they're kind of short-lived at times, right? So, for example, this humanitarian crisis with the detention and removal of folks and the overflow, we had a very similar and it's been surpassed under this current situation in 2014. Some of you all may remember that scenario. I used to walk into my detention center in Westaco. I was a commander there, and my capability there is 215 folks that I can detain. I had 400 to 500 people in the area, and we currently are back to those stages now, just lying around wherever I could place them. So when we finally got the attention of that administration, they sent us an army of folks to help us, DHS folks, FEMA folks, and some policy changes happened, some communication with Honduras happened on that particular occasion, which was the country that was giving us predominantly the most problems. They started accepting back family units on flights quickly, expeditiously, and it stopped. But they sent us, again, a team of folks that opened up an emergency operations center in our headquarters in Edinburgh, and we had people representing every CHS, every CBP component, DHS component you could possibly imagine. And things got done. They got done quickly. Nobody challenged him at that particular time, President Obama. Rightfully so, he gave us all the support we needed, opened up an emergency budget, declared an emergency scenario, and things got done. And levels went back down to normal. We were able to go back and concentrate on, again, more of the criminal element that we would like to concentrate on. This particular time, of course, you guys have seen them try to declare an emergency, and nobody believes it's starting to come around, but again, everyone's challenging the fact that there is a current crisis happening, and we're not getting the support that we did under the prior administration, again, because of the struggles that are happening, politically at the higher levels. So, what would happen if we went back to another administration of a Democratic president? I'm not sure. I don't want to predict that.
Thank you so much, Chief Escamilla. We appreciate your time. I have one final question. If anybody wants to stay afterwards, please do, because we want to finish up the meeting. What about the disease that we're hearing? There was a story the other day about some Ebola, some detainees that possibly were carrying Ebola and maybe other things. What is the process on that, sir? What's really happening with that?
So we do have screening that happens at a few of our detention areas, the McAllen Station, on military, the CPC, the big detention area there on Ursula and Ware, and Westlaco has full-time physicians assistants, doctors and so on available to screen folks. And those who do complain, and it's quite often, aside from the preliminary help that we have there physician-wise, we take them to the hospitals or emergency rooms around the valley to check them out. When, again, they give us a complaint on their own behalf, or we notice something through our own doctors or through our EMTs, or our own Border Patrol personnel. And we are coming across a lot of concerning scenarios, anywhere from TB to Ebola to simpler cases like lice, scabies, chickenpox, measles. Well, you can imagine all these folks coming from these third world countries, not just Central America, but again, Bangladeshis, Russians, Chinese. A lot of them carry a lot of different things that we don't see here.
But they're not being released if they're carrying some kind of like a Ebola kind.
I couldn't answer that question on how much. We won't detain them unless the county or health department says we need to keep these people quarantined and in-house, and that's their call. It turns into something other than a Border Patrol decision. But we right now, statistically, I can't tell you if those people are eventually released or not. So depending on how serious their disease may be. But there is a lot of concerns, and oftentimes our agents are falling ill quite often with the mass migration, for sure. So,
thank you so much. Let's give a round of applause. Thank you so much.
Thanks again. I hope I answered some of your questions. I try to keep this part brief, but I really appreciate all your questions. I hope I was able to answer as much of them as I could with clarity. But I'll stick around for a little bit. You guys have a few more questions as we pick up and go.
From the blue bonnet prairies of Texas to the mountains California way, those hard-riding sons of the saddle do their duty night or day. Their fame has grown in every place they're known along the far frontier. They stand for right, and for their cause they'll fight if trouble should appear. When the history of the West is written, to the world it will be clear. There's glory in the story of the Border Patrol. Along the